Okay, let's unpack this. What if I told you that one of the most obscure, often kind of overlooked ancient Greek philosophers, someone from way back in the 6th century BCE, someone you probably didn't spend much time on in Philosophy 101, might actually hold a key to understanding some really cutting-edge, almost sci-fi ideas in philosophy today?
It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Totally. We're talking about ideas that feel super modern, things touching on AI, artificial intelligence, what it means to be human now, maybe in a post-human future, and even like the universe itself, existing totally separate from us. Big questions.
It really is a remarkable thing, though. It speaks to the enduring power of these fundamental questions. And what's always fascinating, I find, is how often this ancient wisdom, speaks directly to our modern dilemmas.
Even when they feel completely new because of tech or science.
Exactly, even then. Because underneath, the structure of the questions we ask, well, it hasn't changed that much across the millennia. Human curiosity is persistent.
Absolutely. Well, welcome everyone to AI History of Western Philosophy. Today, we're taking a pretty incredible journey, I think. We're going way back. Before Plato, before Socrates, even before a lot of the famous pre-Socratics you might know. We're heading to the 6th century BCE to meet this figure, Pherecydes of Syros.
Pherecydes, yeah.
And our mission today, the goal for this deep dive, is twofold, really. First, we want to show you how Pherecydes' ancient ideas, incredibly, seem to anticipate some really contemporary philosophical movements. Things like post-humanism, speculative realism.
Ideas that are very much live topics right now.
Right. But also, and this is crucial, we want to explore how his unique approach, his whole way of thinking, gives us a powerful lens. A way to maybe critique and understand the limits of these modern projects, too.
He's not just a precursor.
Exactly. Think of him as both, like a visionary echo from the past and maybe a subtle critic whispering across time, helping us question our newest ideas.
He genuinely is. Look, he's often just painted as this transitional figure, a simple bridge between A and B.
Right, between the myths and early philosophy.
Yeah, between Hesiod's myths and the Milesian natural philosophers. But honestly, that really undersells him. As we'll dig into, he's much more than just a crossing point. His thought is, well, it's a unique destination in its own right. A deliberate philosophical system.
Okay, I find that incredibly compelling. So get ready, because we're going to explore his, well, kind of wild cosmology. It's this hybrid thing where gods aren't just up on Olympus. They're like active principles mixed right in with matter.
Deeply embedded.
And souls. They jump between species, blurring the lines of what we even think human means. And chaos. Chaos isn't just vanquished, it's sort of managed.
Contained, yeah. Not annihilated.
And then here's the really cool part for this show. We're going to connect all that directly to stuff you hear about today. Decentering the human, right? Moving away from us being the center of everything.
The critique of anthropocentrism.
And this idea of the great outdoors reality, totally independent of our minds. And yeah, even the concept of cyborgs and like fluid identity.
The connections are surprisingly strong.
It's going to be a journey, I think. It might just reshape how you view the whole story of Western thought, showing that some of our most out there ideas have these incredibly ancient roots. So let's begin properly. Pherecydes himself. Who was this guy? We place him in the 6th century BCE, a figure of singular importance, people say, but also profound ambiguity.
Right.
And this is happening during that period, often described as this huge shift, this seismic shift in Greek thinking. The move from mythos, explaining things through myths and stories.
Traditional narratives, genealogies of gods.
To logos, rational inquiry, reasoned argument. He's right there on the cusp of that moment at a really pivotal time.
Indeed. It's a period that absolutely fascinates historians of philosophy because it really is the dawn of what we now call Western philosophy. And you're right, he's often characterized as just that bridge, between Hesiod's poetic cosmogony.
He's all about divine families and origins.
Right. And then the Milesians, like Thales, who are looking for, say, the material cause of everything, like water. But calling Pherecydes just a bridge, it really, really undersells how radical his project was.
How so?
Well, look at Aristotle, writing centuries later. Aristotle called Pherecydes a theologian who mixed philosophy and myth. Now, that wasn't Aristotle saying Pherecydes was confused or stuck halfway.
Wow.
No, it suggests Aristotle saw it as a conscious and a stable synthesis, a deliberate choice to blend what later thinkers would try very hard to keep separate.
So he wasn't just caught between worlds. He deliberately built his own unique philosophical world using both toolkits.
Precisely. And get this. He wrote what's considered the very first work of Greek prose, Not poetry like Homer or Hesiod, but prose, specifically to communicate philosophical ideas. His book, The Heptamychos or Pentamychos, that's a huge milestone in itself.
Wow, okay, prose for philosophy. That is significant.
It is. So this wasn't some muddled halfway point. He deliberately forged his own path, and he seems intellectually honest about how he's doing it, blending these modes. His thought isn't a transition, it's a unique destination.
That's fascinating. So this conscious choice to synthesize myth and reason. What does that tell us about his whole approach to understanding reality? It implies he didn't see them as enemies, maybe.
Exactly. It implies a belief that both modes, narrative, symbol, personification, the stuff of mythos, abstract principles, reasoned explanation, the stuff of logos were both necessary to grasp the full complexity of the world.
Okay.
He wasn't trying to purify philosophy by kicking myth out. He was trying to integrate them. She saw value in personifying forces like time, but also in thinking abstractly about eternal principles. He built a system that, from his view, worked. It was consistent, comprehensive.
Even if later philosophers obsessed with pure reason thought it looked messy.
Precisely. Later thinkers demanded a stricter separation. But Pherecydes embraced the hybridity. And that very hybridity, that willingness to use all available tools, is key. It's key to understanding his relevance now and why he can act as a critic for modern ideas that sometimes strive too hard for, let's say, a single pure way of explaining things.
Okay, and what a unique system it was, starting right at the beginning with his cosmology. When we think Greek origins, like you said, Hesiod's theogony comes to mind, starts with chaos, right? This big, empty gap, non-being.
A primordial void. Yeah.
But Pherecydes says, nope. He radically rejects that whole idea of creation out of nothing, creatio ex nihilo. How does he set the stage instead? Why is this such a big deal?
It's a fundamental departure, not just from Hesiod, but from many creation stories that start with emptiness or a single divine act upon nothing. His book, The Heptamychos, doesn't open with a void. It opens with this declaration, and it's worth quoting. Zos and Kronos always existed, and Quatini.
Always existed, full stop.
Yeah, full stop. That's a profoundly radical statement for his time, and maybe for any time. It asserts that reality isn't born from non-being. It doesn't spring from a single act. No, for Pherecydes, reality is grounded in three eternal, coexisting, and crucially, agential principles. They have agency, they can act.
So they weren't created, they just are.
They just are, always have been, always will be. This immediately sets up a completely different kind of metaphysics. It's a metaphysics of, let's say, persistence and transformation, an unfolding of what already exists rather than a sudden appearance from nothingness.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about rearranging or unfolding, not creating from scratch.
Precisely. And this core idea that nothing can truly come from nothing, well, it becomes a cornerstone later for pre-Socratics like Parmenides, famous for arguing against creation or destruction.
Right, being is not, being is not.
Exactly. And Anaxagoras, too, with his idea of everything being mixed from infinite seeds. But Pherecydes, he put this no creation from nothing idea right at the heart of his system, right at the beginning, a whole century before Parmenides.
Wow. Okay, so no void, but this eternal dynamic trio, always active. Can you tell us more about these three? Zos, Kronos, Quatini. They sound foundational.
They absolutely are. Understanding them is key to unlocking his whole cosmos. Let's break them down. First, Kronos. Now, this translates as time, but it's not just clock time, not abstract measurement. It's deified time, creative time, a primordial god.
A god of time.
Yes, which is actually quite unusual in mainstream Greek thought later on. There's speculation he might have been influenced by Eastern traditions, maybe Zoroastrian ideas about Zervan, a god of infinite time who generates reality.
Interesting.
In Pherecydes' system, Kronos is the initial generative force. He's described as casting forth his seed, almost like sowing, and from this seed, the fundamental elements emerge: fire, air, water.
So he kicks things off, the prime mover, almost.
In a sense, yes. He's the cosmic demiurge setting the whole process in motion. There's some interpretation that after this initial act, Kronos kind of retires, steps back from actively managing the cosmos day to day, his primary function fulfilled.
Okay, Kronos, the starter motor, then steps back. Powerful. What about Zos? The name sounds like Zeus.
It absolutely does. Zos is an archaic variant of Zeus, clearly connected to the king of the gods, but maybe with a more ancient foundational feel, perhaps tapping into something older than the familiar Olympian pantheon.
And what does Zos do?
Zos represents the principle of ordering and also masculine creative energy. Now, Proclus, a later Neoplatonist commentator who preserved some fragments, tells us that Pherecydes taught that Zos changed into Eros when about to create.
Eros, like Cupid.
Ha! No, not the chubby chair with arrows. Think primordial, cosmic Eros. A fundamental force of attraction, binding, maybe even love or desire in a cosmic sense.
Okay, a cosmic glue.
Something like that. Zos's role, by becoming Eros, is to bind the cosmos together, to lead it into agreement and peace, as the fragment says, sowing unity. So if Kronos is the initial generator, Zos is the great architect, the organizer, the one who brings cohesion and harmony to Kronos's raw output, and ultimately the ruler of the ordered world.
Okay, generator, architect, and the third one, Kurthony. You said she's different from Jay, the usual Earth goddess.
Profoundly different. And this is crucial. Kurthony is not Jay, the manifest visible Earth we walk on, with mountains, rivers, trees. Her name itself, Kurthanos, literally means in or under the Earth.
So deeper, more hidden.
Exactly. It signifies deep, hidden, invisible potentiality. She is the primordial, undifferentiated. Think of her as potent Earth mass. But, and this is key, she is not passive. She's not just inert clay waiting for a divine hand.
She's active too.
Yes, she's an active principle in her own right. She's the very ground within which creation itself will unfold. Think of her less as a canvas and more as a cosmic womb, brimming with unmanifested potential, the fertile ground holding the possibility of everything that will come into being. She's not just matter, she's active matter, embodying a kind of latent agency.
That's a huge distinction. So, okay, let me try and picture this. Kronos is the initial spark, the generative engine. Zos is the architect, bringing order, binding things with cosmic arrows. And Crethony, she's like the living canvas, or the fertile ground. But she's not just passively receiving, she actively holds everything, and creation happens inside her potential.
You've got it. That's the dynamic. An incredibly interconnected trio right from the absolute beginning, no void, just these three eternal, active principles ready to unfold the cosmos.
And that dynamic interplay, that leads us right into how creation actually happens in his system. You said it's an imminent process. What does that mean exactly? How does it unfold within Trithony?
Right, that imminence is what really sets Pherecydes apart from so many other creation stories. Narratives where creation is this external act, happening to some passive stuff, like a sculptor working on inert clay.
God shaping the world from outside.
Exactly. Pherecydes' vision is totally different. It's an unfolding from within. Remember the title of his book, Heptamikos or Pentamikos? 7 or 5 muchoi. These are translated as recesses, nooks, maybe cavities.
Okay.
And these muchoi, these recesses, they aren't just empty space. They are located within Trithony herself.
So the creative action is happening inside the principle of material potentiality.
Precisely. Trithony is literally the womb of the world. The cosmos gestates and emerges from her own depths. Creation isn't imposed on matter from outside. It emerges from matter's own inherent potential, from within the very fabric of Trithony. That completely changes the whole creator-created relationship, doesn't it?
It really does. It makes matter an active participant, not just a passive recipient. So what happens in these recesses, these muchois inside Trithony?
Into these internal recesses, Kronos, the initial generator, deposits his seed. Remember, that seed contained the fundamental elements: fire, air, water.
Right.
And it's here, within Trithony's recesses, that a process called theocrasia occurs. That literally means mixing of the gods.
Mixing of the gods.
Yeah. But it's not just a casual mingle. It's a profound generative intermingling. This mixing gives rise to a second generation of deities and cosmic forces. And this concept of Crassus mixing as a creative mechanism, that's a major philosophical innovation.
How so?
Because it suggests that novelty, new complex things don't just pop out of nowhere. They emerge from the intelligent combination and rearrangement of what's already there. It's a principle later picked up by pluralists like Anaxagoras and Empedocles, who also saw the world emerging from the combination of pre-existing substances. It implies a kind of inherent intelligence or potential within the material processes themselves.
Like a kind of cosmic chemistry almost, where new compounds, new beings emerge from the dynamic interaction of the primal elements within this fertile ground.
That's a great way to put it, a divine chemistry unfolding within the womb of Trithony. And this leads us to that really vivid image you mentioned earlier, the cosmic robe. It's such a memorable part of his story.
Yeah, tell us about the robe. It sounds amazing.
It is, and it adds this beautiful symbolic relational layer to the whole process. The culmination of this generation, this mixing, is portrayed as a symbolic act, a cosmic marriage, if you will, between Zos, the ordering principle, and Coveney, the fertile potentiality.
A wedding.
A cosmic wedding. And on the third day of this wedding, Zos, the organizer, the architect, he fashions this great, beautiful robe or veil. It's called a Pheros. And on this robe, he meticulously embroiders Earth and Ogenos, that's the great cosmic ocean encircling the world, and the mansions of Ogenos, basically the whole ordered world.
He weaves the cosmos onto a robe.
He does. He weaves the ordered world onto this magnificent garment. Then he presents it to Cullity as a wedding gift, and he wraps it around her. It's the symbolic act of adornment, of bringing order and beauty to her potentiality.
Wow. And this act, it transforms her, right?
Yeah.
Finalizes her role somehow.
Yes, profoundly. It's precisely at this moment, this intimate union, this adornment with the woven cosmos, that Cthulhu, the primordial potentiality, becomes J, the manifest, ordered, visible Earth, complete with its geography, its oceans, its features.
So the potential becomes actual through this union and this act of cosmic artistry.
Exactly. And look what this allegory does. It portrays matter, Cthulhu, not as passive clay waiting for form to be slammed onto it from outside, but as an active, potent, generative womb who becomes the ordered world through a divine marriage. She's a partner, not just a recipient.
That view of matter seems incredibly vibrant, almost alive, so different from how Plato or Aristotle saw it later as something kind of deficient or inert.
Worlds apart. Pherecydes presents matter as inherently dynamic, generative, possessing agency. It's a remarkable precursor, really, to some modern ideas. You know, the new materialism in post-humanist thought or speculative physics, people like Anne Hamilton Grant talk about seeing matter itself as a dynamic creative force, not just dead stuff, almost like proto-ideas about emergence in complex systems.
It really sounds like his view of matter is just buzzing with life and potential, an active participant in its own becoming. That's a huge departure from the mainstream that followed.
It truly is. It's a cosmology of deep entanglement, where even the ground of reality is an active player, not just a static stage.
Okay, speaking of dynamic interplay, Pherecydes' cosmos isn't all harmonious weaving and marriage, is it?
Yeah.
There's conflict, too. But the way he handles chaos, this figure Ophionius, it feels different from other myths. Can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. Conflict is central. There's this dramatic battle for cosmic supremacy right near the beginning. It's between the forces of order, often led by Kronos, who seems allied with Zos here, and this primordial, chaotic, serpentine entity called Ophionius.
Giant snake god.
Basically, yeah. Ophionius and his offspring, the Ophionidae. The stakes are cosmic domination. There's a pact. Whichever side is thrown into Ogenos, that great world ocean, loses. The winners get the heavens Oronos and get to establish the cosmic order.
Okay, classic showdown. Order versus chaos, light versus darkness. Sounds familiar. But you said it's profoundly different. How?
Here's the crucial difference. In many other ancient myths, think of the Babylonian Enuma Elish with Tiamat, the creation story hinges on the destruction of the chaos monster. Tiamat is killed, dismembered, her body becomes the material for the new world. Chaos is utterly annihilated, transformed into stable order, a total victory.
Right, chaos is recycled into order.
Exactly. Pherecydes, he offers a completely different ontology, a different understanding of what happens to the unordered. Ophionius and his chaotic forces, they lose the battle, yes, they are defeated. But, and this is the key, they are not annihilated, not dismembered, not absorbed or recycled.
What happens to them?
They are cast out, banished from the ordered world, and imprisoned deep down in Tartaros, the cosmic dungeon, behind massive gates of iron and bronze, contained but not destroyed.
Whoa, so they're defeated but still there. They still exist, just locked away.
Precisely. And the implication of that narrative choice is immense. It means the chaotic, the non-human, the unordered other. It's not eradicated. It remains an eternal, ineradicable component of the total cosmos. It coexists with the ordered world, just in a separate, contained sphere.
So order isn't the absence of chaos. It's the management of chaos.
You've hit it exactly. This establishes an ontology of perpetual management, not final victory. Order, for Pherecydes, requires the ongoing containment of chaos. The chaotic element continues to exist, locked away, but maybe perpetually lurking. It requires constant vigilance to maintain that separation.
That resonates, doesn't it, with modern ideas?
Absolutely. It resonates powerfully with post-structuralist concepts like the constitutive outside. The idea that any system, any identity, any order defines itself by what it excludes. And that exclusion has to be constantly policed because the excluded thing keeps exerting pressure from the outside, challenging the system's stability.
Like a nation defining itself by its borders and who it keeps out. or even psychological repression.
Exactly. Think of thoughts pushed into the subconscious. They don't disappear. They still influence us. Ophiuchus represents this primordial, non-human reality that persists alongside and in opposition to Za's neatly woven world.
So chaos is never truly gone, just managed, lurking beneath the surface, requiring constant effort to keep it contained. That's an incredibly sophisticated and surprisingly modern idea for the 6th century BCE. It makes order feel less like a finished state and more like an ongoing dynamic negotiation with what it excludes.
It certainly does. It suggests a deep realism about existence, that the unordered, the other, is an intrinsic, enduring part of the whole reality, not something to be simply eliminated or wished away.
Now, Pherecydes' radical rethinking doesn't stop with gods and matter and chaos. It extends right down to the individual self. He's often credited with introducing a really transformative idea into the Greek world, metempsychosis. What is that, and why is his version so significant for us today, especially thinking about AI and identity?
Right, metempsychosis. Simply put, it's the idea of the immortality of the soul and its transmigration, its journey after death into another body. Pherecydes is widely credited in antiquity, maybe not universally, but very strongly, as being one of the first, perhaps the first, Greek thinker to really introduce and teach this doctrine.
So reincarnation, basically.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Reincarnation or transmigration. And its originality in the Greek context is often highlighted. This teaching had a huge influence, most notably on Pythagoras, who was reputedly his student. And it became absolutely central to the Orphic and Pythagorean traditions, deeply shaping how later Greeks thought about the soul's journey, purification, and destiny.
So the soul lives on, it doesn't just end with the body.
Yeah.
And there's a moral aspect, too. Punishment and reward.
Yes, there seems to be. The fragment suggests that souls of those who commit great wrongs are banished to Tartaros, that same cosmic dungeon where Ophiuchus is, for punishment. Other souls presumably enter this larger ongoing cycle of rebirth, perhaps for purification.
Okay. But what's the most philosophically explosive part of this for our discussion on this show? Connecting to modern ideas about identity, the self, maybe even AI.
The most potent aspect, I think, isn't just the immortality or the moral journey. It's the soul's radical ability in Pherecydes' system to cross the species barrier.
Cross the species barrier, you mean?
He taught that after death, the soul could pass into another body, either human or animal.
Whoa. Okay. Human or animal. This seems like a small detail, but hang on.
It's huge. That seemingly small detail performs a truly radical deconstruction of what we might call human exceptionalism, centuries before anyone formally articulated that concept. Think about it. If the essential self, the soul, the core of your being, can inhabit a non-human animal body,
Then being human isn't essential, it's just a temporary state.
exactly. Humanity cannot be an essential, fixed category defining the soul. It becomes a temporary state, a contingent form, just a passing phase in a much larger, more fundamental cycle of being that encompasses multiple forms of life, human and non-human.
Wow. So the boundary we draw between human and animal, Pherecydes basically dissolves it at the level of the soul. Our current human form is just one potential stop on the soul's journey that fundamentally rocks our usual assumptions about being human.
It completely dissolves that rigid ontological boundary. The boundary that classical humanism later worked so hard to erect, humans as rational animals, distinct and superior. And it's precisely this boundary that modern post-humanism now explicitly seeks to dismantle.
Okay, I see the connection now.
The Pherecydean subject, the self, is inherently unstable. It's trained species. Its identity isn't defined by its current body, but by the process of its journey through many bodies, its continuous becoming.
Okay, right. Here's where it gets really interesting for AI history of Western philosophy. Because we think of cyborgs, fluid identity, blurring human-animal machine lines. We see that as super modern, right? Born from tech, AI, genetic engineering.
Contemporary anxieties and possibilities, yeah.
But Pherecydes was essentially sketching out a version of this thousands of years ago, this vision of a fluid self defined by its relational journey, its process, not some static essence.
It stands as this powerful, archaic anticipation, an anticipation of the post-human cyborg, maybe, or the relational self. The self understood as an assemblage, constantly co-evolving with its environment, whether that's technological or biological.
It's like Pherecydes gave us the conceptual toolkit for a fluid, non-binary identity millennia ago, just through this idea of a soul-hopping bodies.
Yeah.
That's genuinely prophetic.
It's a profound testament, isn't it? How these ancient philosophical insights can just resonate, sometimes in startling ways, with contemporary thought, even when the context, the language, the technology is worlds apart. The underlying structural questions about identity, about being, about the boundaries of the self, they clearly persist. Thinking about defining human intelligence versus AI, for instance, inevitably pushes us back towards these ancient questions about what even constitutes a self.
This is truly mind-blowing, connecting this ancient Greek guy, Pherecydes, to our modern philosophical landscape, our anxieties about AI in the future in such direct ways. Let's make that bridge even more explicit now. For listeners following modern philosophy, especially on the continent, there's this deep dissatisfaction, right, with Kant's legacy and what came after. How does Pherecydes speak to this whole post-Kantian turn?
That's the perfect transition, because contemporary philosophy, especially these movements we've mentioned, post-humanism, speculative realism, they absolutely emerge from that dissatisfaction, a feeling that Kant, while monumental, also maybe trapped us.
Trapped us how?
Their primary target is this concept called correlationism. It's basically the post-Kantian idea, the axiom that we humans can only ever access the correlation between thinking and being. We experience how things appear to us, how our minds structure reality, but we can never access reality in isolation. Reality as it is in itself, independent of us.
Kant's phenomena versus noumena. What we can know versus the thing in itself we can't.
Precisely. And these modern movements argue that this focus on the correlation, this epistemological closure being stuck inside our own heads, essentially has fostered this pervasive, limiting anthropocentrism, where reality only matters or is only considered insofar as it's reality for us.
Okay, so they want to break out.
They desperately want to break out. They seek to decenter the human subject, push us off the pedestal, and they want to speculate upon, to think about a great outdoors, a reality that exists utterly independently of human thought, human consciousness, a reality before us, beyond us, indifferent to us. And the argument here is that Pherecydes gives us this archaic vantage point, this ancient perspective to analyze these modern movements. He both anticipates their core ideas and maybe offers a critical lens on them.
Okay, so if modern philosophy is trying to burst this human-centric bubble, reach beyond our consciousness, how does Pherecydes' cosmology, especially how it starts, play into that?
Well, the foundational gesture, the first move, for both post-humanism and speculative realism is exactly that. The critique of anthropocentrism, overturning philosophies that privilege the human being and insisting humanity is just one of many natural species. They do this through rigorous conceptual critique of the whole humanist tradition, its metaphysics.
Okay, they argue against human-centeredness.
Right. Now, what's remarkable is that Pherecydes achieves a very similar result. Not through critique, though. Not by arguing against previous systems, but just through his initial cosmological framing. His universe is fundamentally non-anthropocentric from the very beginning.
Ah, so he didn't need to critique anthropocentrism because they never started with it. He basically baked anti-anthropocentrism right into the fabric of his universe from day one.
Exactly. The world, for Pherecydes, doesn't begin for humanity's sake. It doesn't need human consciousness to give it meaning or order. It begins with those three eternal non-human principles: Zos, Chronos, Genii. Their existence is absolute, unconditional. It precedes any life, any consciousness.
Right. The cosmic drama unfolds before we even show up.
Completely. The generation, the mixing, the weaving, the battle with Ophionius, it's all happening on a scale that utterly dwarfs human concerns, humans. We appear super late in his system, and even then, we're just participants in this metempsychosis cycle, which is itself just one feature of a much larger cosmic order. We're temporary vessels for souls.
So the structure itself decenters us.
Inherently. It positions our species as this contingent outcome of vast impersonal forces, not the pinnacle of creation, not the measure of all things. And in this way, Pherecydes' mythos, his story, his personified principles, actually accomplishes what modern Logos' rigorous argument is striving for: building a worldview where the human is not the privileged center.
That's an incredible parallel. It really drives home how these deep philosophical impulses surface again and again, just in different clothes. Now, let's dig into that great outdoors idea more. Speculative realism, especially through Quentin Miyasu, attacked correlationism hard using this concept of ancestrality. What's an ancestral statement, and how does it link back to Pherecydes?
Right. Miyasu's attack is really focused. His key weapon is the ancestral statement. What is it? It's a scientifically meaningful and considered true statement about a reality that necessarily existed before any consciousness, any life emerged on Earth.
Like scientific facts about the early universe.
Exactly. Think, the universe is 13.8 billion years old, or the Earth formed 4.5 billion years ago, or this fossil bacterium is 3.5 billion years old. These are statements about a reality that existed completely outside the possibility of being observed or thought by any conscious subject.
Because there weren't any conscious subjects then.
Precisely. Now, for a strict correlationist, these statements should be incoherent. How can you talk meaningfully about a world that existed before the possibility of being thought or perceived? But Maizu says, look, science does make these statements, and they are considered true and meaningful. Their validity, for him, proves that we can think a reality independent of thought. We can access the great outdoors. Science gives us this window onto an absolute reality that existed before us.
So science pierces the correlationist circle by giving us verifiable knowledge of a preconscious reality.
Yeah. Okay.
And you're saying Pherecydes did something conceptually similar way back then, just using myth instead of physics.
Conceptually, yes. Pherecydes' entire cosmogony, his whole story of origins, can be read as one massive ancestral statement, an attempt to articulate a reality utterly independent of human consciousness. His opening line, Zos and Kronos always existed in Critic, posits a reality that isn't just pre-human, it's pre-cosmos. It's a reality before the conditions for observation, before any life.
Okay.
His book, The Heptamychos, is this deliberate attempt to access and articulate that absolute pre-relational reality. He doesn't start with human experience like later phenomenology does. He starts with the being of the world itself, positing these eternal principles as foundational, existing in themselves.
So the structure of the intellectual move is the same.
The structure is strikingly similar. Both Pherecydes and Maizu are trying to break out of what we could call the circle of immanence. For Maizu, it's the circle of thought depending on being, and being depending on thought. For Pherecydes, maybe it's the circle of the immediate observable world around us. Both try to leap beyond that circle to speculate on the nature of reality as it is in itself, independent of any observer.
This is genuinely mind-blowing. You're telling me this ancient Greek philosopher, using mythic language, personification, narrative, was basically engaged in the same fundamental intellectual project as a super contemporary philosopher using math and logic to prove there's a world independent of us. That's incredible. It makes you wonder if the tools change, but the deep questions, the urges, remain constant.
It absolutely does. It really underscores that this human drive to grasp ultimate reality beyond our immediate perception, is ancient. It just gets expressed through different methods, different vocabularies across history.
Okay, let's pivot slightly to another big branch of speculative realism. Object-oriented ontology, or OO. This advocates for a flat ontology. What on earth does that mean, and how does Pherecydes' universe with its gods, monsters, souls fit into this very modern, very strange-sounding idea?
Right. Ooh. It's a central part of speculative realism, and yeah, its core slogan is flat ontology. What it means is it rigorously rejects privileging any particular kind of thing over another, especially rejecting the privilege humans usually give themselves over non-human things.
So humans aren't special, ontologically speaking.
Not in OO, no. In OO, everything is an object. Whether it's a physical thing like a mailbox, or a subatomic particle like a quark, or a collective like an army, or even a fictional character, and yes, human beings too. All of these are considered objects.
Everything's an object. Okay.
And they all exist on the same ontological plane. Flat. No hierarchy. Each object has its own unique reality, its own being. And it can't be reduced just to its parts or just to its relationships with other objects. The big goal here is to dismantle that traditional subject-object hierarchy that's dominated Western philosophy forever, since Descartes at least, where the human subject is the star, the perceiver, and everything else is just an object for that subject.
So no privileged viewpoint, no ladder of being, everything just is, existing side by side, equally real. That really does level the playing field.
Exactly. Now think back to Pherecydes' Cosmos. In its own mythic language, its own idiom, it presents a remarkably similar picture, an archaic, flat ontology.
How so?
Well, look at who populates his world. You've got the eternal principles, Zas, Kronos, Crunthony. You've got the second-generation gods born from their mixing. You've got the primordial serpent monster, Ophionius, and his brood. And eventually you have human and animal souls cycling through.
A whole cast of characters.
Whole cast, and they are all active participants, agents in the cosmic drama, each with its own distinct capacities, its own role. They are all objects in that OA sense. Distinct entities with their own natures, their own powers, engaging in conflict, marriage, creation, transformation. Zos weaves, Kronos generates, Kithani contains, Ophionius battles.
There's no single viewpoint character running the show.
Exactly. There's no single privileged subject for whom everything else is just an object of perception. Pherecydes gives us this cosmos of interacting agents, a vibrant, pluralistic world where every entity seems to possess its own irreducible reality. You can definitely see that as an archaic version of a flat ontology.
So in Pharisees' world, a god weaving a cosmic robe, a serpent monster battling for dominance, a soul hopping between bodies. They're all ontologically as real, as distinct, as agentic as a human being. That truly flattens things. It sounds incredibly dynamic, like this complex ecosystem of beings, divine, monstrous, human, animal.
It truly does. It's a world teeming with distinct active beings, none inherently superior in their fundamental existence, all contributing to the unfolding cosmic story.
And finally, let's loop back to that unstable trans-species self we talked about earlier. How does Pherecydes' ancient idea of the transmigrating soul connect directly to the post-humanist relational subject, and maybe even Donna Haraway's cyborg from our modern tech age?
Right, the post-humanist critique of the stable, autonomous, self-contained human subject. It finds perhaps its most iconic expression in Donna Haraway's Cyborg, especially from her famous Cyborg Manifesto. For Haraway, the cyborg is this hybrid creature, part organism, part machine. It's a creature of social reality and fiction, and its very existence dissolves those neat boundaries we like to draw. Human-animal, human-machine, physical, non-physical.
The lines get blurry.
Completely blurry. The post-human subject, in this view, isn't some pre-given fixed essence. It's a relational, emergent assemblage. It's constantly in flux, constantly being shaped by its entanglements with non-human others, whether that's technology, animals, ecosystems, data streams. Identity becomes a process, a continuous becoming, not a static state.
So the human is no longer this isolated island, but more like a dynamic network node, constantly interacting with and being changed by the non-human world, including AI, biotech, etc. How does Pherecydes' ancient soul hopping relate?
As we discussed, his doctrine of metempsychosis provides this powerful ancient analog, the transmigrating soul. It's defined not by its static form, not by the body it happens to be in now, but by its dynamic journey through a whole multiplicity of forms, human and animal. That's a compelling model of a non-essential processual identity.
Because its identity is the journey, the process.
Exactly. The Pherecydian self is fundamentally relational. Its existence is its passage through a series of bodies, its place within this cosmic cycle of purification and rebirth. Just like Haraway's cyborg breaks down the human-machine or human-animal binary by its very nature, so too does the transmigrating soul break down the human-animal binary.
Okay, I see it clearly now.
Both figures, the ancient soul, the modern cyborg, they challenge that notion of a fixed, self-contained human nature. They replace it with a vision of identity as fluid, hybrid, defined by its connections to a wider, non-human world. The very concept of self for Pherecydes seems to be this continuous unfolding, this dynamic journey, rather than a fixed destination.
That's truly remarkable. It's like Pherecydes gave us the conceptual framework for a fluid, non-binary identity thousands of years ago, just using souls and bodies instead of microchips and flesh. He imagined a self that exists in relation to multiple forms, not locked into just one, which sounds incredibly close to how post-humanists see the self as this evolving assemblage, this reconfiguring network, truly prophetic. The echoes are just undeniable, suggesting these modern insights have a much longer, deeper history than we usually think. Huge implications for how we think about AI, consciousness, our place.
Indeed. It reveals that this desire to understand ourselves as part of something larger, something more fluid and interconnected than a fixed essence. It's a very old, very persistent philosophical impulse.
Okay, this has been an absolutely fascinating exploration of how Pherecydes, this ancient thinker we barely talk about, somehow anticipated so many threads in modern philosophy.
Yeah.
Post-humanism, speculative realism. But what's just as interesting, maybe even more provocative, is how his thought, especially that unique blend of myth and reason, can also act as a critical tool, a way to maybe probe the limits, the blind spots, the unexamined assumptions of these very contemporary movements.
Absolutely. His unapologetic synthesis, that deliberate blending of mythos and logos, it gives us a unique standpoint, a perspective from which to question the methods and maybe even the conclusions of his distant philosophical heirs. He offers a viewpoint that many modern thinkers, in their quest for pure reason or scientific certainty, have intentionally discarded. And maybe something important was lost in that discarding.
So what does this all mean for us today, thinking about these modern ideas? Let's start with that persistence of myth idea. Speculative realism, as we said, presents itself as super rigorous, philosophical, even scientific, using logos hard logic, math, to break free from Kant, to think reality itself. But could it, seen through Pherecydes' eyes, actually be creating a new myth? maybe without realizing it.
That's a really crucial, maybe uncomfortable question that Pherecydes' approach forces us to ask. Look, speculative realism, especially someone like Mayasu, aims for pure rationality, strict adherence to non-contradiction, mathematical rigor. But critics have pointed out that post-humanism, speculative realism, they can start to function like myths, not meaning they're false stories, but meaning they act as grand narratives, explaining origins, essences, the fundamental nature of things, yet often existing in their own conceptual space, sometimes detached from everyday experience or simple empirical proof.
Like foundational stories we tell ourselves about reality.
Kind of. Remember, that historical shift from mythos to logos, it was never a clean break. Rational systems, often unconsciously perhaps, retain the deep structures of the myths they try to replace. Now, from a Pherecydian perspective, someone who openly used mythic structures doesn't speculative realism's quest for the great outdoors, this reality, totally independent of thought, looks structurally identical to an ancient cosmological project, an origin story.
Okay, unpack that. How are they structurally similar? The methods seem worlds apart, mythic narrative versus modern logic.
The methods are different, absolutely. Pherecydes use narrative, personification, allegory, the tools of mythos to describe his ultimate principles. Zaz, Kronos, Krythony, their cosmic dance. He wasn't pretending these were lab results, they were deep truths conveyed through story. Miyasu, on the other hand, uses mathematized science, formal logic, the tools of logos to argue for this absolute, unthinkable reality he calls hyper-chaos, a realm of pure contingency where anything could be different for no reason.
Okay, different tools.
Hugely different tools. Ancient narrative versus modern abstraction. But the fundamental act, the act of positing an ultimate, speculative ground for all reality, a ground beyond direct experience, yet somehow accessible to a specific, advanced kind of thinking. Isn't that the same basic move? Pherecydes' honesty about his myth-making highlights the possibility that speculative realism, despite its rigor, despite its claims of pure logos, might just be creating a new myth for our post-Kantian secular age. It replaces primordial gods with hyper-chaos. It replaces the fates with radical contingency. It offers a new, highly abstract, but still fundamentally narrative account of the absolute.
Wow. So is it even possible, then, to speculate about ultimate reality, reality independent of us, without eventually resorting to some form of mythos, some kind of foundational story? Pherecydes seems to suggest it inherently requires a leap, a narrative structure that goes beyond pure proof. Is speculative realism just telling sophisticated new stories about the great outdoors without fully admitting they are stories, rather than purely logical deductions? That's a serious challenge to its self-image.
It forces us to ask whether any attempt to grasp the ultimate origins, foundations can truly escape that narrative impulse that defined mythos, even when it's dressed in the most rigorous logos. Pherecydes hints that maybe some truths need a story, even a very abstract philosophical story, to be apprehended.
Okay, that leads to another critical point, the problem of agency. When we looked at Pherecydes' cosmos, agency felt everywhere. Zas weaving with purpose, Kronos generating, Dani actively containing. It felt rich, relational, purposeful. How does that clash with object-oriented ontology's idea of these withdrawn objects? And what question does Pherecydes raise about interaction and emergence?
Yeah, there's a really sharp contrast here. Pherecydes' cosmos, as you say, is buzzing with agency. It's distributed, yes, among many beings, but it's also rich, relational, seemingly purposeful. Zas becomes Eros in order to lead the world into agreement and peace. That sounds intentional. His weaving the robe is artistry, intention, bringing order and beauty. The world feels actively relationally constructed through these meaningful interactions. It's a dynamic process.
A very active, interconnected universe where things genuinely influence each other. How does OO see interaction?
In stark contrast, Yuo posits this universe of withdrawn objects. Remember, every object, human, stone, AI, has this real essence that's fundamentally inaccessible to any other object. Objects are like these self-contained little bubbles, monads, so all causation, all interaction has to be indirect. It's a vicarious process, mediated by what Oak calls sensual vicars, or caricatures of other objects. Basically, objects never truly touch or know each other's essence directly. Their interactions are always indirect, partial, like translations.
Okay, so they interact, but only superficially, never essence to essence.
That's the idea. Now, this model brilliantly avoids anthropocentric correlationism by flattening everything, but it faces a huge challenge. How do complex, ordered, integrated systems emerge? Think of a living cell. an ecosystem, a sophisticated AI developing emergent behaviors. If all objects are fundamentally withdrawn, isolated, and their interactions are just these superficial translations, how does deep integration happen? How does genuine novelty or self-organizing complexity arise? The very weaving of the cosmos, which Pherecydes explains through Zos's purposeful agency, becomes really difficult to account for in a universe of fundamentally isolated entities.
So the Pherecydes mythic model gives a powerful answer for how complex order emerges. Intentional, relational agency, a kind of cosmic collaboration or artistry. But does OEO, in its effort to escape human-centeredness, maybe create an ontology so fragmented, so withdrawn, that it struggles to explain fundamental interconnectedness or the emergence of complexity without just waving its hands?
It's a critical challenge, one that critics of UU definitely raise. Pherecydes' cosmos suggests something important. A non-anthropocentric worldview doesn't have to be non-teleological, purposeless, or non-relational. The agency of the cosmic weaver, even if it's mythic, might actually be a more powerful explanation for why we have a woven, interconnected world than an infinite parliament of isolated monads interacting only indirectly. It makes you ask if UU's commitment to radical withdrawal might accidentally undermine its ability to explain the real complexity and integration we see everywhere, including in emergent AI.
That's a profound thought. It forces you to weigh what you prioritize in a model of reality, avoiding anthropocentrism versus explaining observed complexity. Yeah. Okay, last critical angle, ethics. Post-humanism wants to decenter the human, right? Make ethical space for animals, ecosystems, maybe AI, noble goal. But you suggested that in radical forms, it risks flattening all perspectives so much that ethical judgment becomes impossible. How does Pherecydes, maybe paradoxically, offer a more nuanced path?
Yes, this ethical dimension is crucial, especially for a show like AI History of Western Philosophy, thinking about future responsibilities. Post-humanism's ethical project is primarily about decentering the human, critiquing human exceptionalism to expand our moral circle, include animals, ecosystems, maybe future AIs. Great intention. But in its more radical forms, there is a risk. If you flatten ontology completely, if all perspectives are equally valid, if human agency and experience become just one data point among trillions, where does ethical responsibility land? How do you establish value? Purpose. It risks sliding into a kind of ethical nihilism, or at least a paralyzing relativism, where any action is as good or bad as any other, because there's no privileged standpoint from which to judge.
So radical decentering could accidentally create an ethical vacuum, where meaningful judgment just dissolves. But Pherecydes, who also radically decenters the human ontologically, somehow avoids this.
It seems he does. He offers a more nuanced model. He shows a way to achieve non-anthropocentrism without ditching ethical meaning. As we saw, he absolutely decenters the human at the level of being. The human form is contingent, temporary. The soul isn't essentially human, it's just passing through. That's radical decentering. However, and this is the crucial bit, he appears to retain a strong narrative and ethical significance for the human experience within his overall cosmology.
How so?
Metempsychosis isn't just random shuffling. It's often framed as a cycle of purification, a spiritual evolution with a direction, a purpose. And remember, Tortaros, souls of wrongdoers are explicitly punished there. That implies a robust moral framework. Actions have consequences. There's a right and wrong way to live. The soul's journey may be culminating in a return to human form after a long cycle as a narrative arc, a purpose, and serious moral weight for the individual soul.
Okay. So the Pherecydean model gives us a standpoint to critique those forms of post-humanism that might throw the ethical baby out with the anthropocentric bathwater.
Yeah.
He shows you can acknowledge humanity's non-special place without erasing moral meaning.
Precisely. He demonstrates you can dismantle human ontological privilege without erasing the significance of the human perspective, human ethics, human narrative. His cosmos is non-anthropocentric, yet it provides a meaningful context for human purpose and morality. He suggests that decentering doesn't require abandoning the human point of view entirely, but rather properly situating it within a larger, more than human story. It's about finding our place, understanding our contingency and connection, not annihilating the very possibility of human significance or ethical judgment.
This has been an incredibly rich deep dive. Pherecydes of Syros. He really emerges as this remarkable, almost uncanny anticipator of so many core ideas in post-humanism and speculative realism. His non-anthropocentric starting point, rejecting creation from nothing, that vision of active generative matter, the flat ontology, the fluid trans-species self, it all powerfully prefigures arguments happening right now.
He really does provide this powerful testament that the critique of human-centeredness isn't just a modern or postmodern invention. It has roots going way, way back in the Western tradition, right to the beginning.
And yet at the same time, his thought acts as this potent critic. His unapologetic mix of myth and reason challenges speculative realism's claims to pure logos, suggesting it might be a new cosmogony in disguise.
Right. His model of purposeful relational agency questions whether a purely withdrawn, object-oriented ontology can truly explain the emergence of complex order, whether biological or artificial.
And his way of retaining ethical meaning within a decentered cosmos warns against a post-humanism that might flatten values to the point of nihilism. He shows that meaning can thrive even when we're not the center of the universe.
The enduring power of Pherecydes, I think, really lies in that unapologetic hybridity. He wasn't a failed transition from mythos to logos. He represents a successful, stable synthesis of both. He showed it's possible to speculate rationally about reality that's logos while also embracing narrative, personification, purpose, mythos as vital tools for making reality intelligible, meaningful, resonant.
So for you, our listener, thinking about all this, here's a final thought to maybe chew on. In our age, where philosophy is grappling with how to move beyond the human thinking about climate change, AI, animal rights, without losing its ethical compass or its ability to find meaning, does this ancient hybrid model from Pherecydes, this model that refuses to purge one way of thinking for the other, does it maybe offer a more robust, more complete, maybe even more honest framework for figuring out our place in the cosmos? More so than modern projects that, for all their sophistication, might just be telling new, highly abstract stories about the great outdoors without ever fully admitting they are stories. It really makes you reconsider the whole trajectory, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It invites a critical look at the foundations of our current thinking.
We definitely encourage you to explore Pherecydes further if this sparked your interest. Or dive deeper into post-humanism, speculative realism. There's a whole fascinating web of ideas out there. Thank you so much for joining us on this mind-expanding journey on AI History of Western Philosophy.